If you want to be a part of the conversation before it happens here on YouTube, click that link in the description to join the free Courtside Financial Discord. What's going on, everyone? My name's Obi, and welcome back to the Courtside Financial Podcast, the podcast where we talk about business and technology. In today's story, we're going to be talking about a story that's been dominating headlines lately, but maybe not in the way that it should be. So it'll be a super interesting, super insightful episode. We'll get to the meat and potatoes of it. But before we do, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We are trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before the year is over. Before we do that, we got to get to 8,000. Make sure you hit the like button, click the notification bell icon, share the video, leave a comment down below. All your engagement really does go a long way in helping out the channel, helping us to reach a broader audience and serve a greater community. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into today's episode. You've probably seen the headlines about what's being called the biggest breach of US government data. But let's take a step back and look at what's really happening here. While mainstream media focuses on one narrative, there's a much deeper story about government transparency, taxpayer oversight, and the fundamental question of who really owns government data. Here's something to consider. Every day, thousands of unelected government officials have access to our data at various government agencies, our social security numbers, our tax returns, and our financial history, all in the hands of people we never met or even voted for. So why the sudden outrage when the Presidential Advisory Board gains access to these things? Let's break down what we know. The Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, has gained access to various government data sets. Yes, this includes sensitive information, but here's what the headlines aren't telling you. The same information has been available to countless government contractors, consultants, and officials for years. The real story here isn't about data access. It's about transparency. For years, we've been asking questions like, what's going on with our tax dollars? What conflicts of interest exist within our government agencies? And why isn't there more oversight of government spending? Now, let's talk about some real-life examples of government spending that deserve more attention. Did you know that in recent years, the government has spent millions of dollars on studies that seem questionable at best? We're talking about $2.3 million to study if hot tubbing can actually reduce stress. I think we all could have answered that one. Or what about $3.4 million researching why coffee spills when you walk? These might sound like amusing anecdotes, but they represent some serious money. Your money. Us as taxpayers. But it gets bigger, much bigger. Let's talk about military spending. The Department of Defense has failed multiple audits, unable to account for trillions of transactions. That's not a typo. We're talking about trillions of dollars that can't be tracked or properly explained. So where's the media's outrage about that? And here's another disturbing pattern. Government agencies often spend enormous sums of money at the end of their fiscal year, and it's just to avoid budget cuts in the following year. It's called the use it or lose it phenomenon. In September alone, the last month of the fiscal year, agencies have been known to spend about 20% of their annual budget. Think about that. That's like spending 1/5 of your salary in the last month just because you can. Now let's dive deeper into the transparency issue. When we're talking about government transparency, we're not just talking about where the money's going. We're talking about understanding who makes the decisions about spending, what relationships exist between government and private contractors, how are contracts awarded and to whom, and what metrics are used to measure the success or failure of government projects. Let me share a concrete example. In 2024, a government agency spent $400 million on a software upgrade project. Sounds reasonable, right? But dig deeper and you'll find out that the company that won the contract had former government officials on its board. The system was delivered 3 years late and $200 million over budget. And yet this barely made the news. Think about it this way. If you ran a business and you had someone who worked for you that spent money like this, odds are you'd fire them right away. But in government, it seems to be just another day at the office. Let's talk about timing too. When major decisions are made, how much time does the public get to review and insert their feedback? More often than not, 1,000-page bills are passed with only a few hours for review. How is that transparency? How is that accountability? And that's where DOGE access becomes interesting. Yes, these are sensitive systems, but they're also potentially shining a light on issues. When was the last time we had independent eyes looking at how government actually operates from the inside? Consider these numbers. The federal government employs over 2 million civilian workers. It manages over 4.7 trillion in annual spending. It operates hundreds of agencies and departments, and yet so many of them have yet to complete a successful audit in years. Now, I know some of our listeners might be thinking, isn't this still a security risk? And yes, that's a valid concern, but here's the counterpoint. If our government systems are truly secure, shouldn't they be able to withstand scrutiny? And if they're not secure, don't we deserve to know that too? The media's focus on data access might be missing an even bigger story. The story of how government works or doesn't actually work for the American people. When we talk about transparency, we're really talking about trust. Can we trust that our tax dollars are being used wisely? Can we trust that decisions are being made in our best interest? Here's a thought experiment. What if every government transaction over $10,000 had to be justified? What if every conflict of interest had to be declared in plain language? What if we had real-time tracking of where our tax dollars are going? Would that be more dangerous than the current system's limited oversight and selective disclosure? As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. Sometimes the biggest story isn't the one that's making headlines. Sometimes it's the story behind the story. The questions that we should be asking but aren't. Until next time, this is Obi from the Courtside Financial Podcast, reminding you to look beyond the headlines and ask the hard questions. The real story isn't just about who has access to the data, i.e. Elon Musk. It's about what the data tells us about how our government really works. That's it for this episode. Obi signing off of the Courtside Financial Podcast. Hope you found it useful, valuable, insightful, at the very least, maybe entertaining. If you found it to be any of those things, make sure you hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below, and click the notification bell icon. I'll see you in the next episode of the Courtside Financial Podcast. Peace out. Thank you.